Hey guys, what's up? This is Josh Norman.
This is Joe Gibbs
You listen to Redskins Talk.
with JP Finlay.
Well, it's the first Monday after the 2018 NFL Draft, and boy, oh boy, what a weekend it was down in Dallas, especially for those boys that came out of Virginia Tech. Bob Trossett joining you from the NBC Sports Washington podcast studios in Bethesda, Maryland, and today I have a special guest on the line. It's the longtime voice of the Virginia Tech Hokies, Bill Roth. Hey, Bill.
Hi, Bob. Nice to visit with you. How are you?
I'm doing well. We're ready for another week, and boy, did you have a chance to watch the NFL Draft this weekend?
I did. I was one of 11 million Americans that tuned in on Thursday night. Had the Caps Penguins on one television and the draft on another, and I tried to follow both at the same time. It was interesting. Obviously, the storyline from Virginia Tech perspective and the Bills and the Steelers was for the first time ever two brothers go in the first round. And so that was a really cool football story and a very cool human interest story.
Yeah, we had a chance to, obviously Virginia Tech's a little bit farther away from what we usually focus on here at NBC, but, with the Edmunds brothers being who they are and they allowing us actually over Easter weekend to document their web series is what we called it, the E-Boys. We've really felt in tune with them, and it's been really fun to watch. You've had a chance to cover these guys the last few years. Obviously, I think you probably hoped that Tremaine would stick around for a little bit longer. I think Terrell gave you 3 years. But just overall, what are your initial thoughts by the fact that the Edmunds brothers, as you mentioned, are the first pair of brothers to be drafted in the first round in NFL draft history?
Well, and they're brothers in the league, too, so it's pretty good for the family to have 3 kids in the NFL. That doesn't happen very often. But I will say this. They have the DNA from their mom and their dad that they know what it's about. They've grown up around it. They've grown up in a family and then in a collegiate culture where they work really hard, and they clearly have had tremendous physical gifts to begin with, but they've been very well coached. And I think that's what the Bills and the Steelers saw in those guys. I think there's probably some faster guys out there. And I think, for Terrell to go in the first round, I think was a bit of a surprise to a lot of people. But the more you look at it, you understand what Pittsburgh was thinking.
What really struck me during Easter weekend is the bond that these 3 brothers have with each other, and also the respect they have for their parents. And obviously, you just kind of alluded to it. Farrell Edmunds, the father of these 3 boys, was an NFL Pro Bowler. How much of that relationship do you think really blossomed because of his impact in the NFL?
Well, he was a great player, obviously, but an even better dad, obviously, as well. His work ethic, his ability to back away and let the coaches coach, not get involved, I think was huge. Put the trust in Coach Beamer initially and Coach Fuente in the last 2 seasons, and Bud Foster, who was the defensive coordinator for their entire careers. I think that says a lot about how to handle things as a dad. Even when you were a great collegiate player and a great NFL player, you've got to trust the college coaches and let the kids learn and make their own mistakes and whatnot. But the track record for sons of NFL players is pretty good, particularly those that have come out of this program. And they grow up around it. Everything they see, they've kind of been through, whether it's training camp or press conferences or injuries or tough losses or euphoric victories at the NFL level. That's all these guys know because they grew up around it. And so a lot of the stuff that they are going to experience, their dad did. And they did as kids, and then as middle school kids, and then as high school kids when they were living at home. So I think it's really a great opportunity for those guys. And how proud must his mom and dad be? Right? Both the parents here are incredibly ecstatic, obviously, at this point.
For those listeners who are tuning in that aren't too familiar with Virginia Tech and the football program, how would you describe these 3 guys and their careers down in Blacksburg?
Well, different positions, in a way. It's kind of like the Fuller brothers from Baltimore who came here, and all three made the NFL. I think that there's somewhat of a humbleness to it, where hard work and value of team is maybe placed in a higher area than maybe some other things. And I think that they're great teammates, and I think that helps them a lot. And they're going to be really popular guys in the locker room. You know, Bob, sometimes when you lose a game, you wonder who you're going to turn to that next day in the weight room or the training room or the linebacker or safeties meeting room or a team meeting, who's always going to have a great attitude and who's going to be a leader when things are bad. That's what the Edmunds brothers are all about. And that's what makes them so attractive to have on your team. They're going to be a positive influence in the locker room and in those team meetings. And obviously on game days, we see that. But I think what probably sets them apart is and again, because of the DNA of their background and where they've come from, they kind of have a bigger picture on things, and they understand you lose games. And sometimes bad things happen, and we're going to get right back at it the next day. And as a coach and as a GM, that's exactly the kind of guy you want in your locker room, right? Because even the best NFL teams get beat, and you don't want anything to fester. And they're great kids, and I'm ecstatic. I mean, the Saints, the Steelers, and the Bills each have one of them, and that's really awesome from my perspective. That all three of them are going to be contributing to teams in the NFL.
And the crazy part is that all three could be playoff teams, and who knows? We could be seeing a brother-brother matchup coming next winter. It's pretty crazy.
Well, you hear so many stories about troublemakers in the NFL, guys that get sideways with the team or with the law or with their families and whatnot. And here's three dudes that are 180 from that, and that's what makes them so attractive. I mean, you can look at the 40 times and vertical jumps and all these things, and his lateral speed that they measure, all these things, and whatnot. But character and heart and commitment to team, the things that every coach wants and every GM wants, these guys score 10 out of 10 on that. And that's why maybe you take a flyer, and that's why maybe you take a guy that might have been a second-round pick 3 weeks ago and pick him in the first round if you're Pittsburgh.
Being joined by the longtime voice of the Virginia Tech Hokies, Bill Roth, on the phone right now. Bill, I find it funny that you bring up the concept of that humble mentality, because what struck me about my time with the Edmunds brothers during Easter weekend was just how much of the theme of humble beginnings means to these three. And I think it starts with their parents and the fact that Farrell, even though he was an NFL Pro Bowler, he wanted to go back to Danville, Virginia, and raise a family there. And, over the last 30, 40 years, Danville has really seen its struggles. And it's a low-income town. It's a very rural town. But the boys really see that that's what molded them into who they are today. And when we were doing our web series there, that they made it very clear that they are in it for the long term with Danville, and they want to give back. And that's what struck me the most about these three.
I agree 100%. And I don't know the Ball brothers as well as I know the Edmunds brothers. But sometimes a father can create and paint a different picture than what you might want on your team. And I bring that up because it's possible that the three Ball kids are going to be humble and great team players and be amazingly successful, or they might be, outrageously public guys that are always in the news and be successful too. I mean, there's a lot of guys that like to yap and are incredibly successful. But I think as a coach and as a general manager, you kind of prefer the opposite. and I think the way they were raised and the way they're going to contribute to their teams and their cities, it would not surprise me if in 5 years, 7 years, one of these guys is an NFL Man of the Year.
Bill, how about the moment where, what I've read, and I think I confirmed this the other day too, is that when you're a projected first round draft pick, you're obviously invited to Dallas. So when you get invited, you have an opportunity to bring a guest. And Tremaine decided to bring Terrell because Terrell was not projected to go in the first. And how about that moment when Terrell, which he was so poised. It looked like he knew that he was going to go number 28. First of all, it totally looked like that across his face. But then the fact that he is basically brought into the league by the story and the great man and the great story that is Ryan Shazier. Describe that moment on campus there at Tech.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I was actually in Richmond, but I was watching on television. I think that everyone was just so happy. Everyone who knows the kid is happy for him, and I'd like to say this: they're really good students too. And these guys have taken. I mean, there are very few guys that were first-round picks this past week that could white balance a camera, frame a shot, record it, and then edit their own piece in Premiere. These three dudes can. They're all about it, and they went to class at Virginia Tech, and they went through comm classes and media labs, did stories and did packages, and so I think the students that were their classmates are just as happy for them as their teammates are, and a lot of guys that are in the NFL want to get into broadcasting when they're done. These guys are in broadcasting before they started, and I think that's really cool about them.
And you know what? That's a credit to your program, what you guys are doing there, Bill. My last thing for you is this. I was joking with Tremaine on Easter Sunday, and I'm going to joke with you right now. What are the chances that Tremaine, I told him, I hope your career, and you don't have to think about this for many, many years, but does he have a chance to potentially be an analyst? Because I hear that he's interviewed you before.
Yeah, he's got a chance to be on air, but he's got a long way to go before that. Maybe he'll be the guy on Monday Night Football in 15 years. That would be sweet.
Well, they're looking for a slot right now, but I think he's got himself a job.
He's busy. He's busy for the next decade.
Bill Roth, the longtime voice of the Hokies. Bill, thanks so much for calling in, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun watching especially from in Blacksburg. It's going to be a lot of fun this upcoming 2018 NFL season.
Thank you, Bob.